Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by our military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast that's given a voice to our veterans. On today's episode, we have Marine veteran Joe Davila, Master Gunner Sergeant Retired. But before we get into my veteran story segment, are you enjoying this podcast? Then consider being a TLA patron. That's right, a Lost Arts patron. It is with donations that we are able to continue recording these podcasts and getting our veteran community's voices out for all to hear. Just go to the Lost Art website and click on the Become a Patron link. Any donation is appreciated. If you would like to be a special guest on the podcast and tell your story, then email me at thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. That's thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. All right, without further ado, please welcome Master Gunner Sergeant Retired Joe Davila. Joe, how you doing today?
Hey, it's excellent. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast, man.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear what you got to say. I've known you for a couple of years now, I guess. But every time I chat with you, I always get some great stories from you. So I'm very excited.
Okay, man. It's my first time doing something like this, so I'm pretty stoked to be on your show here and see how it goes.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, let's start at the beginning for you. Like, what was it that prompted you to join the Marine Corps, and what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so this actually, I tell this story a lot. Definitely used to tell it to the younger Marines when they were looking to join or when they were just getting to the schoolhouse down here at Dam Neck. I was a kid from Brooklyn, New York. I wanted to get out of New York City. My whole family still lives in New York City. So for me, it was kind of, getting away from, the hometown area there and seeing a life bigger than Brooklyn.
Right.
So I was sitting in Earth Science class one day. And this guy sits behind me, a very friend of mine in Earth Science class, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm joining the Marine Corps," and it kind of clicked to me. I was like, I never thought about that before, but that sounds like a pretty interesting thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
I was 15 years old, so it took me about another 2 years to be able to, actually enlist. But I hung out at the recruiting station for about a year, helping them, with calls and interviewing people and giving like the little, practice ASVAB to people.
Right.
But right on my 17th birthday, like the day after my 17th birthday, I played hooky from school. I went down to New York MEPS, and I enlisted. And it was probably the best thing I've ever done.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So down at 17, that's pretty wild.
Right. Yeah. I was 17 years old. I was a senior at high school. I did probably about a year in the delayed entry program, and again, hung out recruiting station throughout that summer. And I left on September 16th, 1996.
Wow. And then you went to Paris Island, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit, like your introduction to boot camp there, and how was boot camp for you? Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, interestingly enough, my boot camp platoon or my company was actually doing the test crucible. We were kind of like the test bed before General Krulak kind of went full steam with the crucible. So that was that was kind of like the end of recruit training for me. It was getting a taste of what that would be like for, future recruits. But, I don't know. I showed up at Paris Island. It was dark out, right? You get to the airport and, you get on the bus, you start heading down that way. And I had never been in the South before, never really been out of Brooklyn all that much. So the first thing I remember is just the intense heat, like the humidity, the smell of the moss trees out there. That was just a new feeling to me. Even in September, it was still humid and hot and miserable. So that was my first taste of being in the South, other than the recruit behind the chow hall little line there telling me, asked me whether I wanted grits or oatmeal, and I had never even seen a grit before, so that was interesting. So I got it, I ate it just because it was kind of one of the things that I could scarf down really quickly. The other thing that I was really, I guess, naive to was I'd never seen anybody dip Copenhagen before. New
Oh,
York
really?
is not really a big thing,
Yeah.
so like chewing tobacco is not really a thing up there. So the whole time I was in boot camp, my drill instructor had this fat lip, and I was like, thought to myself, like, I bet he gets punched in the mouth a lot. I didn't realize that, like, he was actually, dipping a, chew at that point and swallowing
Ooh.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
spit at the
Choking it
same
down.
time. Yeah, so that was funny. But the biggest thing that I remember from boot camp really is I broke my foot on that like test crucible, and it was like the 10-mile hump back is when I felt pain in my foot, but I didn't really actually realize that I broke it until I took my boot off when they were checking blisters afterward.
Oh,
I made
wow.
it back. But I couldn't get my boot back on my foot after I took it off. It swelled up, so I wound up having to go to medical. And my biggest concern was, am I going to be able to graduate?
Yeah.
And senior drill instructor told me I finished the crucible, so I was going to graduate. So I wound up coming back to Paris Island on medical hold, which is interesting, right? Because that's a blessing in disguise, even though I didn't feel like it. I went on
Yeah.
my 10 days of boot camp leave, and then I went back to Paris Island for 4 months to rehabilitate. And being around the caliber of NCOs that I was around, being around, just the drill instructors down there and being able to call them sergeant and listen to them, have them mentor me and, teach me how to, iron my uniform, roll
Right.
my sleeves, stuff like that. I felt like I got an edge up on a lot of my peers. But the
Yeah.
biggest thing I got an edge up on, and I didn't mention this up front, but I came in open contract.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, when I came in the Marine Corps, they didn't have I wanted to be an intel professional and they didn't have that job available to me. So I came in open contract, and the whole time I was going through boot camp, everybody thought I was crazy, right? Because they'll ask like, "Whose MOS is what?" and people would raise their hands, and then we're like, "Who came in open contract?" It was me and another, you know, goofball that did that, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, "You guys are crazy. You don't even know what job you're getting." So when I went back to Paris Island to rehabilitate, in the back of my head, I was like, I remember when they did that moment of truth. That last moment where they give you to tell whether you did drugs or not.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have recruiters come in to do that. And I was like, there's recruiters here at receiving. And I bet if I could get down there and kind of, make friends with one of them or do something, to catch one of their attention, maybe they'll help me out. So, while I was on hold, they would kind of farm us out to the different entities down there on Paris Island to do working party stuff.
Yeah.
And I was able to get myself situated where I wound up in the office where the recruiters were for the region. And I would take out their trash and, they would try to, talk to me and mentor me and this, that, and the other. I let it go for about a week and then bam, I was like, hey, I'm open contract. Can you guys get me intel? And within a day,
No
I had
kidding.
had a school seat, and I was like, that New York hustle helped me out just a little bit,
Heck yeah, it did.
here. So, that's my boot camp story. I wouldn't have, probably gotten the MOS, that I got had I not broke my foot and went back to Paris Island.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no telling what you'd have been doing. But that's
Yeah.
that's you started out early with that hustle and that really just behind the scenes and talking to people and networking and stuff like that. You started early, man.
Right. It was a precursor to things I would do later on in my career. But I think, every time I go home, I see some teenagers in New York or whatnot. I'll let them know, like, uh, being a teenager growing up in New York, you're very fortunate because you get to work with a lot of different people. You
Yeah.
get to go to school with a lot of different people. You get to make friends with a lot of different people, and everything's a network. Um, so folks, I feel like that come in from the inner city, they tend to do really well if they're able to kind of discipline themselves and work in the lines of what the Marine Corps provides you to work in.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty awesome. So then at this point, your leg or your foot heals up and
Yeah,
then you go to Intel school.
right.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
So went to MCT at Geiger. That was a little awkward because I was down at Paris Island. I was working in the chow halls here and there.
Yeah.
So I was recognized by a lot of the recruits that were down there when I showed up, and I had time and grade on these guys. And back in your first enlistment, if you've got 3 or 4 months on somebody, that's a big
Oh,
deal, right?
yeah, huge deal. Yeah, absolutely.
Senior PFC, right?
That's right.
So so that was a good time. Went through MCT and got done with that, and then showed up to Dam Neck.
Okay.
First thing I remember about Dam Neck was this: there was a fire alarm my first night there, and I had no idea where I was going or what to do. So that was great.
See you just wandering around.
Yeah.
Very nice. And how was Intel school for you? Did you find it easy? Was it difficult?
Intel school, what do you call somebody who graduates like last in their class at medical school?
Well, I'm assuming you're saying a doctor because,
Right, and that's
yeah.
exactly how I would describe myself in Intel school. Right?
Okay, yeah. That
Yeah,
makes sense. Okay.
yeah. I went through Intel school. I definitely was at the top of the class. In fact, I was lucky to graduate. It took a lot for me to focus. My high school life was a little different than my Marine Corps trade school life. So trying to understand some of the concepts in the fire hose that we were getting taught
Right.
was rough, but I made it through, and I was pretty stoked with that. The thing I remember about Intel School the most, and he wound up being a really close friend. There was a Lance Corporal there, and he was a student,
Hmm.
and the guy had like two rows of ribbons. He was bald, old, for a Lance Corporal. He must have been, I think, 32 or something like that.
Wow.
And I remember the first time I looked at him, he's like, "Hey, I'm the guide here." And I looked down, I was like, "Okay." And in the back of my head, I was like, "Man, what do you have to do to get promoted to corporal?" Right? Like, yeah,
We'll never
you're
make
gonna,
it.
I'm never gonna make it here, right? So, come to find out, he had changed services once or twice. He'd been in the Navy and I think the
Mm,
Army prior. So he was a Lance Corporal walking around with a hash mark, and I was like, "Why did you, do this? I mean, you were an NCO
yeah.
in two different services." And he's like, "I always wanted to be a Marine, and this is where I'm at." So he was great, great mentor. I ran into a lot of great people at the school. Um, Interestingly enough, what my platoon sergeant, she was a lat mover from a different MOS, going through as she was a sergeant at the time,
Right.
and she was an incredible mentor while I was there as well. But leaving there, I actually ran into her later on down the road at drill instructor school. She was a staff sergeant. Now I was a sergeant. We were both going to school together again.
Very nice.
So just a lot of great mentors along the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And then how long was the school for you?
School was about 3 months long. It was on hold for 2 months, so I spent probably about 5 months in Virginia Beach, and man, that was a hardship tour during the summer. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
bet it was.
compared to some of the other folks with schools in different areas, but I really enjoyed my time at Dam Neck. Made some great lifelong friends there, but was really happy to get out of there and head out to the operating forces afterward.
Yeah. Absolutely. And where did you go first once you left there?
So went to 10th Marine Regiment out at Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
I was the intel clerk there, and that was only for a short period. I was there for about a year, maybe a year and some change. I got promoted to corporal, and there was kind of an overage in the office, and they were trying to get the artillery battalion stood up with S2 shops. So I
Okay.
wound up getting promoted to corporal and moving down to a battalion very quickly as the S2 chief.
Oh,
But I was
nice.
kind of, one of one there.
Yeah.
So being the S2 chief really didn't, I was just in charge of intel for the
Right.
most
Yeah.
part because there was definitely no people under me.
So, and then while you're there, you're just kind of, as the intel, you're gathering information, passing information along to the battalions and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah, at the regiment level, a lot of, security management, while we're in garrison. This is all obviously pre 9/11.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
doing a lot of, intel administrative functions. I mean, you know, the intel piece was not very active at that time there, but I'll tell you the personal growth piece was big.
Okay.
I showed up there, and again, I'm from New York, right? So I don't have a license to drive,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm stationed at Camp Lejeune now. So there's no place I can go. I'm stuck at the barracks. The office had set me up to go to Humvee school, and I was like, okay, I'll go to Humvee school. In my PFC mind, I thought that I would get a driver's license at Humvee school
Oh
when they
no.
gave me my Humvee license. So I wound up going to Humvee school and getting dropped within like an hour. I show back up in the office and they're like, nobody's ever been dropped from Humvee school before. Like, you've got to be the worst Marine ever. And I was like, I don't have a driver's license, man. So, my staff sergeant, at the time was, again, great. I was very fortunate, a lot of great leadership. My staff sergeant, kind of took me under his wing and taught me how to drive, in his car,
Very nice.
and was able to get me my license. And then, my payback was to go to Humvee school and actually get the license this
Yeah.
time. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. He also helped me with education too. He started me on the track to get my, I eventually left the Marine Corps with a master's degree. That wouldn't have been possible without Staff Sergeant. I remember, um, writing an email, and I thought this email was literature, and I hit send. And it was like banging blue mail. It was all caps. It was horrible, right, back in the day. It was,
Yeah.
so I hit send, and I kind of sat back, and I was like, this is literature right here. I sent it to everybody in the office. And I
Right.
heard some snickering, and I turned around, and it was like lieutenants like laughing. And I
Yeah.
was like, gee, I want to see what's so funny. So I go walk around and, laughing at my email. Like I had misspelled there a couple of times. I probably didn't use the right punctuation or whatever. And, the staff sergeant saw me getting kind of, really mad. And
Yeah.
he grabs me by the collar, trucks me in the car, and he takes me down to the base ed center, and enrolls me, in a, English class. And
Nice.
again, without him, I probably, I probably would have eventually found my way to college, but he definitely got me started on the right track.
Yeah. Probably would have been a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
well, that's good that he started you out young, and it's good that he grabbed you by the collar and just drug you down there and said, "Hey, you're going to do it."
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
I
awesome.
never wanted to make a lieutenant laugh again.
Yeah, that's a wise decision, I think. Uh, okay, so at that point, how long were you there?
I was at the regiment level for about, like I said, about a year,
Okay.
maybe a year and a half. Did a couple of exercises, no real deployments, anything like that. And then, I got promoted to corporal, and they moved me down to the battalion, which
Yeah.
was great. I was kind of chucked into an organization where I was one of one,
Hmm.
and I didn't really have a choice but to do my job properly, because I was the only person in the whole battalion that could do the job. So
Right.
that experience taught me how to run an office. It taught me how to do, administrative tasks well. It taught me, the importance of, just make sure that if I am pushing out analysis, it's not biased. Things of that nature, that
Yeah.
normally as a corporal, like you would not interact with a lieutenant colonel directly, battalion commander, but I was thrust into a position where I was on the battalion staff and immediately, involved in planning for things. And,
Right.
it was a good experience.
Very cool. And then how long were you at the battalion there? There.
That was again the probably the last portion of my first enlistment. I got
Okay.
promoted to sergeant when I left there, so probably about a year and a half there as well. And that's kind of after that I went to pretty much across the river to New River Air Station.
Yeah.
Um, and I was the the squadron intelligence chief there. It's a different environment. There I actually had two or three people that were mine, that I
Right.
got to mentor and kind of work with. So that was pretty cool. And I re-enlisted there. That's where I made my decision to stick around for another enlistment.
Okay.
At that spot.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it that drew you to say, "Hey, I want to re-enlist and stay in the Marine Corps"?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that it was something really profound, but reality is that my MOS we were offered a pretty substantial bonus compared to others, so that was
Yeah.
something that was lingering over my head. I got to stay in North Carolina. I got promoted to sergeant, and I had this thought that I was going to be able to go to DI school at some point in time, and I was kind of striving for that.
Right.
So I thought a second enlistment would help me get there. Ultimately, I was like, at a minimum, I want to do a B billet, but I hadn't really, put my finger on what it was yet.
Yeah.
So in my head, I thought, okay, I'll do another enlistment and then I'll get out. My thought was I'll go on recruiting duty, see if I can't get someplace in New York. And then at the end of that, tour, I would rotate out of the Marine Corps. And my thought again was, NYPD.
Hmm.
In the metaverse or whatever my kids call it, like there's a detective Joe Davila running around Brooklyn someplace, because that's kind of, my, my alternative future, that I
Right.
really wished I would have, been able to kind of devote some time to, before I got old and figured out that that's not okay. I can't do that now in my, late forties, but, yeah. So that was my reasoning. I had the duty station I wanted, and I thought one more and I'd probably rotate out. But, not to skip ahead on you or anything, but probably
No, that's
about
fine.
three-quarters of the way through my time, I had been working with the Young Marine program,
Okay.
which is kind of like a militarized Boy Scouts.
Hmm.
They've got units all over the country, and kind of teenagers. It's a drug demand reduction program, anti-gang program. And I've been working with that program since I got to Camp Lejeune, for an awesome individual named, James Jones. Retired as a lieutenant colonel, great
Mm-hmm.
mentor. Um, he, uh, he took a lot of interest in my career because I was volunteering, working with kids and whatnot. So about halfway through my time at the squadron there, I had volunteered to go on recruiting duty because again I was executing my plan.
Right.
I had my eye on getting to New York. In fact, I interviewed with a sergeant major at RS New York. Was kind of given a green light that I'd go to recruiting school and get selected to come back to New York and recruit out of there.
Right.
And I saw the orders popped, naval message popped, and I was charging down that road. But this Chief Warrant Officer Jones guy from the Young Marine program, he pulls me aside and he's like, "Joe, do you really want to go on recruiting duty?" And I had really been giving him I've been like, man, I can't wait to go out there. I'm I'm going to beat the streets. I'm going to get a lot of, but he knew based off my interactions, I'd worked with the kids. I was, pretty much a drill instructor for the kids.
Right.
He's like, you probably should be a drill instructor. And I was like, well, I'd love to be a drill instructor, but just the way my MOS was, it was really hard to get out of my MOS to go do B billets like that
Right.
on a voluntary basis. It kind of had to be recruiting duty because they had to give somebody up for that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of the sacrificial lamb that year. Anyway, long story short, he's like, "Hey, you want me to make some phone calls?" And I was like, "Sure, just don't get me in trouble, sir, please." Like, whatever you do, like, I don't care who you call. And I was like, I went home that night and I was like, yeah, he's not going to have any luck. He doesn't know my field. It's kind of, stringent on letting people go or whatnot.
Yeah.
I remember the next day I overslept by like 45 minutes, which I never do, right? I never oversleep. But I showed up in the office and it was like, 8:15. And, one of my Lance Corporals comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, Sergeant, Chief Officer Jones called for you probably about 07:30. I was like, "Oh." I was like, "You must have been told no quickly."
Yeah. Got a
So,
quick answer.
yeah. So, I picked the phone up and I give him a buzz. And, if you know James Jones, he's got, hey, good news or the bad news, So
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, well, front me with the bad news, right? What's the bad news?" He's like, "You got to be there in 2 weeks."
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, so what's the good news?" He's like, "I got you orders to DI school and it was a hot fill. And I think because I had been released to the to the special assignments monitor, they were able to do some things with what, B bill that I was able to get on,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to, I think, my community. And I wound up down at Paris Island. My monitor didn't even know I was down there. I was getting ready to leave Paris Island probably about 3 or 4 years later, and they were doing a road show, and I showed up there, and he's like, "Who are you?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Joe Davila." He's like, "I show you on recruiting duty." I was like, your Excel spreadsheet's wrong, man." But yeah, I had 2 weeks to get down there, and it was amazing. It was fast. I probably was a lot farther behind a lot of the other people in my class, just because they had time. They knew they were going there. They were kind of
Mm-hmm.
getting mentally ready, physically ready. I showed up with about 2 weeks to prepare. Luckily, I was single at the time, so I just took everything I owned out of my barracks, chucked it into my Nissan Sentra, and just hauled butt down to Paris Island.
Right.
Got there in 4 hours, was able to make it. But I know I frustrated my instructors at DI school because everybody, when you go to DI school, a lot of them already have the teach backs memorized. People are
Yeah.
like running, 21 minutes. It took me a lot of catching up to do, to be able to, get through that course. And to top it all off, my squad instructor at DI school was, Sergeant Major Troy Black.
Oh, no
So,
kidding. Okay.
the standards were high.
Yeah. 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 Wow. That's pretty wild. So what was your experience like, at DI school and then going into, drill instructor duty itself? What were the things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I was like the most awesome drill instructor school student on the face of the earth, but the DI school was a struggle. But I made it through, and I enjoyed just the people I was with at the school. We still keep in contact with each other. The
Mm-hmm.
amount of us that stuck around for making a career out of it. But I think again because I only had 2 weeks really to get my mind set and get down there, everything like I was learning things as I was going and I
Right.
wish I had a little bit more time to prepare. The school itself was, I wouldn't want to do it again,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was probably one of the best leadership schools I'd been through in the Marine Corps, and having the instructors to the caliber that I had. Future Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, the Sergeant Major Archie was down there. There's a lot of different people that I would see later on in my career doing awesome things down the road.
Right,
It was an amazing experience. The thing that I guess frustrated me the most when I was at DI school is we all had a chance to pick what battalion we were going to go to, right? Or we wanted
right.
to kind of go observe with. And I was picking 3rd Battalion. I was a 3rd Battalion India Company recruit, so I wanted to be 3rd Battalion hat. That's all I
Right.
wanted to do. So I got the T-shirts. You got down to Oak Clothing, they issue you T-shirts. I got all my blue T-shirts. I was like, this is going to happen. I'm going to go to 3rd Battalion. And then like the last week of DI school, RTR Sergeant Major came down and like played, spin the wheel with all of our assignments. And I wound up going to 2nd Battalion.
Oh,
And I remember
really?
having to go down to Oak Clothing with all my blue shirts and trade them back in for the red and gold shirts, the 2nd Battalion shirts.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is crap, right? But I wouldn't trade it for the world because as much as I wanted to be a 3rd Battalion hat, I got to tell you, being at 2nd Battalion was a blessing. It was awesome.
Yeah,
The people I was with, the leadership there, it was an amazing time, and I wouldn't have had it any other way in the backside of things.
yeah. Wow, that's pretty awesome. So you're at Second Battalion. What company?
I started off at hotel company,
Okay.
and I remember this vividly too. So you get through DI school. I had like 30 days of leave
Yeah.
to mess around with. So I took all my leave, went down to New York for a little bit, came back a week early because I was going to get myself situated again. Right, so I'm
Hmm.
kind of a planner. I like to make sure I'm prepared for things.
Yeah.
So I kind of did a drive-by of hotel company, and I saw the first sergeant out there, and I went up and I shook his hand, and I was like, "Hey, first sergeant, I'm coming. I'll be on deck here in about." I'll be checking in about, 4 or 5 days. And he's like, you just shook my hand. You checked in, Devil Dog. Right. So I kind of gave him that look like, for real? And he's like, yeah, see you tomorrow. So,
Get
I
settled
said, hi,
in.
first sergeant. Yeah. Said, hi, first sergeant, got my smoky. And I like showed up the next day and I was working, platoons.
Nice. Wow. And then how many platoons total did you end up cycles did you end up going through?
Oh man. So one, two, three, probably about, I think it was 8,
8.
was my, if I did math for Marines in my head, 8 would be it. One of them, my last one, I was a series guns,
Oh,
for
nice.
that. So I had, 2 platoons, in the series. It was a winter, platoons. They were all very small platoons.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, 8, I wound up going to Charleston Airport. I was the only single staff sergeant in hotel company and we got tagged with Charleston Airport liaison. So I wound up going out to, Charleston for a year, in the middle of my time at, Paris Island. And I was the liaison up there. So I would meet the recruits as they were getting off the planes and put them on the bus to go down, to Paris Island. So that was a good time as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that they had that out there. That's pretty cool.
I think it's moved. When I was up there, all the recruits would flow in through Charleston Airport, and I think they've moved it down to Savannah now, which kind of negates the need to have somebody permanently up there for the year.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Anything else that you can think about when you're a drill instructor? Good things, bad things. Was it a good experience overall? Like how would you explain to people your experience there?
I had a great time. Experiences vary, but for me, the school environment's not really, it's odd because I was an instructor and I love being an instructor, but the schoolhouse for me is not necessarily my strong suit. I never
Hmm.
really liked being in schools, but when I actually got to do the job, I usually would excel and have a great time. When I
Yeah.
was on Joel Field, I did one platoon as a 4th hat, one as a 3rd hat, one as a heavy, and then the rest of the time I was a senior drill instructor. Really enjoyed being a senior drill instructor and shaping, molding, recruits and, getting them through, hardships to, graduation. So it was a great time. I guess the most significant thing that happened to me while I was on drill instructor duty was not like getting off the drill duty with, a successful tour. I actually met my wife while I
Oh,
was
okay.
on,
Hey, that's an important
drill
part.
instructor duty. Yeah. Yes, yeah, I met her. She was my company corpsman.
Okay.
And there's something about being in a safety vehicle and driving 3 miles an hour for 10
Uh-huh.
miles behind a formation where you get to know the person sitting next to you. And after I left Paris Island, we started dating long distance, and then we got married shortly after, right before I went on my first deployment.
Wow. Very cool. So you're taking very romantic cart rides behind the recruits. Uh,
They were not romantic at the time. They were definitely not romantic at the time. Yeah, we started dating. I had finished my last platoon probably about a week or two before I was supposed to PCS out of there, and that's actually when we went on our first date.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's good. That's good. You got to get to know somebody before, that's good. All right. So, yeah, now I'm assuming you got promoted in there to staff sergeant at some point? Because you said you
Yeah.
were company guns.
So I got promoted to staff sergeant. Man, I want to say it was like I didn't realize this is how like zoned in I was to graduating the high school. I didn't get my picture taken because I didn't think I was going to be in zone for staff sergeant.
Yeah.
And, while I was at the schoolhouse, they forced everybody to go down and get the picture taken. I didn't
Right.
realize I was in zone at the time. So I didn't think anything of it. I show up, back at the barracks one day, and the BEQ manager, is a young lady, and she's sitting there. She's like, congratulations. I looked at her. I was like, well, what are you congratulating me for? I was on my first platoon at this point. I didn't even
Yeah.
realize I had gotten selected. And she's like, you're Joe Davila, right? And I was like, yes. She's like, you're selected for staff sergeant. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that I was in zone. So I was like, how'd you get the staff sergeant list? And she was looking for her husband on there because I bet he had gotten selected as well. So she was
Okay.
rolling through the names on the list. And the first person to congratulate me to get selected for staff sergeant was somebody I didn't even really know all that well, and I didn't realize that I had gotten selected. Yeah.
And probably saying, hey, you got to get your stuff and get out. You got
Yeah.
selected. You got to go somewhere else.
Well, interestingly enough, it was probably the most anticlimactic, promotion event I had ever been to. So my number got called, and again, I was a green belt drill instructor, so it's always like, who's on the recruits, who's on the recruits.
Yeah.
So they pulled us away during Leatherneck Square because it was my month to get promoted. It was like me and three other people. So I was in boots and utes, and roll up to the company commander, and they promote us on the spot. There's no pinning or anything. We're just standing there in our yellow shirts and stuff,
Yeah.
and I walk away. And the first recruit that comes up to me, call me sergeant. It's like, nope, nobody. I'm a staff sergeant now. So it really threw him for a loop because I wasn't even wearing my blouse at the time. So I
Yeah.
went from sergeant to staff sergeant with no way for them to discern it at all.
Yeah. I'm sure they were really freaking out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's good stuff. All right. So after drill instructor duty, where did life take you then?
Yeah, so not so backtracking, right? My first platoon, 9/11 happened,
Okay.
and I was on. The recruits were in some classes or whatnot, and I remember being, my mother, everybody was still in New York at the time, and I remember being hauled around this other guy's pickup truck as we were listening. And then we heard the second, tower got hit. That kind of changed my outlook. It changed my idea of getting out of the Marine Corps after 8 years. So I did reenlist again down there at Paris Island. And when I did get a chance to talk to the monitor as I was leaving, I told him I wanted to go to Victor Coded Unit on the East Coast as soon as possible. And I left Paris Island in 2004 and checked back into Camp Lejeune to 2MEF, and then from there, I only spent probably about a month at 2MEF. I was supposed to be there longer, but I was able to get myself down to an infantry battalion, and that would be 3-2. Yeah, I went to 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. I was
Okay.
the S2 chief there.
Very nice. Now that you're there, did you deploy with them or?
Yep, sure did.
Yeah.
So they were actually that was kind of a hot fill as well. I was at 2MEF, and for some reason they lost their 2 chief, and they needed a replacement fairly quickly because they were getting ready to deploy within about 5 or 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So I jumped down there to the section, and we immediately started prepping to go to Al Qaim,
Mm-hmm.
Malabar province.
Right.
Great relationship with my S2. And again, I mentioned that I got married right before my first deployment.
Yeah.
My S2 would eventually be my best man at my courthouse wedding down at Onslow, because all good devil dogs have two marriages, right? You've got the
That's right.
courthouse marriage, and then you've got the family marriage that happens later on down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, so you get married. Now, did she come up to, Lejeune with you at that point, or she stay, like, where was she at?
So she went on to a different school. She went to go on to be a biomedical photographer, and she was going to school in Bethesda, Maryland. And eventually, when we got married, they cut her orders down to Lejeune Naval Hospital, which is perfect. But she
Okay.
got to live in my house before I did, because we bought a house, or I bought a house. We
Yeah.
got married, and then she wound up moving into it while I was deployed. So when I got back from that deployment, I was looking for all my, Budweiser 40-ounce bottles that I collected over time with Mardi Gras beads and bobblehead like things and
Yeah.
stuff. All the Bachelor stuff that I had, and was all in a box in the garage. And she had, redone everything, and it was really, homey. She made it a home.
Yeah. 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 She just took all your bachelor stuff and says, "We're going to
Yeah.
put this away, hide it
Yeah.
somewhere."
Yeah. Best time to do it while I was deployed.
That's right.
I had no say.
That's right. Oh man. And then, how was your deployment when you deployed with them?
I couldn't have thought of a better unit to be part of. 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines was a great unit. I don't think there's a great time to be in Iraq, but being with that unit and the staff NCOs that were part of that unit was amazing. It was a very family. We looked at each other as family, and the deployment, probably the biggest. I would say driving force on that deployment for us was I really respected the battalion sergeant major. He treated everybody as a tactical unit. The headquarters battalion folks, or excuse me, headquarters company folks, he forced us into a grunts mindset. We were
Nice.
getting classes on sort of weapons, and actually it was really important as we did go out to the middle of Al Qaim, Iraq, in the middle of nowhere. We were kind of alone and unafraid out there. Did a couple of different operations, Matador, and
Hmm.
some other things occurred while we were out there. But it was a great deployment, as far as great deployments can be,
Hmm.
because of the people that I was with. And some awesome Marines, and to include my section. I couldn't have had a better group of Marines in my section.
Very nice. And then you were, I'm assuming, like, about 7 months or so on that deployment.
Yeah, we were out there for 7 months. I got selected for gunny while I was out there, so
Okay.
I knew that when I got back, they were going to move me. Just at the time, staff sergeants were battalion chiefs, gunnies were regiment chiefs, so I knew
Right.
I had to kind of find myself a new place to go hang my hat immediately. So once I got selected for gunny, we returned, got promoted, and I knew 6th Marine Regiment was getting ready to go out, and that was another, just a historical unit.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
had a gap for their S2 chief, and I started throwing my hat in the ring for that, and I PCA'd from 3-2 to 6 Marines within about 4 or 5 months of getting back on deck from that deployment.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you said you were the regimental, uh, at that point?
Yeah,
Regimental S2. Yeah.
went to 6 Marines Regimental S2. They were getting ready to deploy. We went out to Fallujah in 2007. It
Okay.
was a year-long deployment. So we were, again, really tight-knit crew, great boss, great regimental commander, great sergeant major.
Hmm.
We all rolled out there. It was pretty volatile up front. Lots of, IEDs and things floating around the area, but it was kind of right in the middle of the awakening
Okay.
when I'm trying to remember names now, Sheikh Sitar and some of these other folks started coming into play, and
Right.
AQI started kind of falling back a little bit. They were just being kind of destroyed
Hmm.
internally by forces within Iraq. By the time I left the area there, we were not having a lot of kinetic activity out there. It was pretty quiet.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a great deployment. Lots of awesome folks out there. Couldn't have asked for anything better. That deployment actually sticks out to me more because probably about 3/4 of the way through, I got pulled out early. I got selected to go to National Intelligence University, And, I was kind of, battling, myself with it because I wanted to finish the deployment with my Marines, but at the same
Right.
time, I got selected for an opportunity. And there was a lot of folks that were rotating in and out, mostly officers, because of, just the way their, career level schools kind of pop up.
Hmm.
Some of them had to depart early. So I had to leave by August. And the deployment was not supposed to end till like November, December timeframe.
Okay.
And the sergeant major came in because I was thinking about, should I defer or whatnot. Sergeant major is actually the one who's like, no, you go. You've got an opportunity here to finish your bachelor's degree and you should take it. So I did.
Yeah, very nice. And then so what was that program that you were part of?
So, National Intelligence University, it's offered to, O2s and 2600s, mostly Intel folks, but it's a Intel school.
Hmm.
They provide bachelor's and master's degree, programs. So it was really cool, to be able to get out there and go do that program. I had been working on my education against that staff sergeant, kind of grabbed me by the collar and brought me down to the education center.
Right. Yeah.
Upwards of about 12 to 13 years by that point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got the chance to go out to, they pretty much take all the credits that you had for your undergrad and you do a year in resident there with them and they give you a bachelor's degree at the end of it. So that was my 2007 to 2008 year. I was there with them, getting my bachelor's degree.
And where did you say that was located?
It used to be in Washington, D.C. It's now changed, to Bethesda, Maryland.
Okay.
They have a campus, up there and it's an intelligence community school. My cohort was me, another Marine, and all the five services, represented there. And then, we also had, different government agencies, Intel folks there as well, going
Wow.
through their, master's degree programs. So great. That in and of itself was probably my first introduction to what national level, you know, government intelligence agency type stuff looked like. It was a good time.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. I didn't even know that existed. So I mean, I'm not a Intel guy, so I guess that would make sense. But but yeah, that's really cool. So you ended up getting your bachelor's, you said, whenever you left there?
Yep, finished my bachelor's degree, while I was there, and immediately jumped into a master's program with a different university. But after I finished the bachelor's degree, it's another move, right? So you go
Yeah.
there for a year, and you had to move again. So I had already been thinking like, okay, where do I want to go? I got drill instructor duty under my belt,
Hmm.
a couple of combat deployments, and now I've got a bachelor's degree. Some folks had mentioned, hey, why don't you go to OCS? Have you thought about one officer program? And for some reason, and none of that really appealed to me. It's kind of a little longer in the tooth. I feel like being a second lieutenant, be in my late 30s,
Yeah.
was kind of where I wanted to be. So I stood enlisted, and decided that I wanted to go down to Dam Neck to teach. So that was a great,
Okay.
time as well. I was able to link up with some folks that I knew throughout my career that were still down at Dam Neck and kind of get pulled in. And I wanted to be in the course director for entry level intelligence training while I was there.
Oh, very nice. Okay. And then so how long you were there for 3 years teaching?
Yep, did 3 years, and I look back at the student population we pushed through. It was amazing to see, just like the Marines that were coming in, they were very stoked. They all knew, deployments were in their future. It was like 2008 timeframe. Folks were coming in and they wanted to get busy, in theater. So we were able to take the curriculum that we had and transition it to be more coin in nature,
Right.
with a lot of the, just experts, just the expertise that we had in the schoolhouse. We were able to transition a lot of the curriculum there to that, to support those deployments that were coming up.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. And then okay, so what would you say your favorite part about being there at the schoolhouse and instructing? What was your favorite part?
I love interacting with the Marines. I really did. I like teaching my MOS. That was fun. But I definitely like interacting with the Marines, getting them through, courses, portions of the instruction that, might have been daunting for them. Trying to figure out ways to, if I saw like, students having a problem with instructions based off the feedback we were getting, trying to figure out how we can take something complex and make it digestible to a brand new, 17, 18, 19-year-old PFC coming in the military with zero base of military knowledge. Like, how can we take things that are complex and teach it,
Right.
based off what they already know? That to me was probably the most interesting challenge there. And then, just dealing with people. I'm a people person. I like, talking to people. I like helping them through things. So, seeing Marines that were struggling, homesickness, stuff
Hmm.
that, I think we can all empathize with as we're coming up,
Yeah.
and helping them work their way through that to great careers, has always been awesome. I think, for me, as I look back, on the time I spent in the Marine Corps, my successes have not really been my successes, especially after that first enlistment. Watching, people that I have been able to mentor, mold, provide advice to, seeing them, go on to do awesome things, has been, probably the best portion of the career. So as I look at what was like really meaningful to me at Damneck during that time frame, it's the same thing that's been meaningful to me throughout my career, is just seeing people succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great trait that you have, and you, because you are a people person. Like, even whenever I was introduced to you and all that type of stuff, like you could tell that you like to be around people, you like to talk to people and stuff like that. And it definitely made it an easy transition for me when I was coming in and meeting people and stuff. So, uh, I think you do a great job at it.
Awesome.
All right. So after Intel school, what happened with you then?
So I got selected to Master Sergeant. I
Hmm.
don't know what the Marine Corps was thinking, but they did it. And, I wound up, as I looked at my career, I had done a lot of East Coast time. By all means, I was an East Coast Marine. And then, the little bit of time that I did at Paris Island, or DC, so I was like, where's the monitor probably likely to send me,
Hmm.
right now? And, I had no Okinawa time, so I
Yeah.
knew that like at some point in time he'd be thinking about that. So I called him before he had a chance to tell me that he wanted me to go to Okinawa, and I asked like, "Hey, I know you're going to send me to Okinawa. All I'm asking is for an infantry division. Can you send me to an infantry division?" So I wound up going to, Third Marine Division, after I left, Damneck the first time there,
Okay.
to be the operations chief at the G2.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And how was your time in Okinawa?
For me as a Marine, it was definitely eye opening. I got to see things from a larger perspective. It was kind of my first time also being assigned to like an '06 level G2. So interactions with senior officers was again one of the first exposures to being in that environment. So I enjoyed it. One of the things that I thought. I guess, we talk about traits and networking and things of that nature.
Right.
I had been, when I was done at Third Marine Division, I've been there 3 years. I had probably about four different G2s, right? Four different like O5s or O6s that I had to work with.
Hmm.
And then, my deputies, I went through probably about five or six of them. One of the things I started to pride myself on was being able to advise a lot of different personalities, right?
Yeah.
So I was able to, I'd have G2s that were like very detail oriented, and then I had G2s that were wave tops, right? Hey, just give me the wave tops. I trust you to execute.
Right.
And you've got folks that are definitely micromanaging, right? And they want to be all up in the business all the time, right?
Yeah.
So trying to figure out like, match personalities with all those as an enlisted Marine, especially if you're looking to be an advisor of any way, you have to be able to mold yourself to the boss, right?
Hmm.
Trying to force the boss into your mold is not going to work.
Yeah.
It creates strife. So, I do find that again after time, they, no matter who the personality type is, they'll begin to trust you more if you are able to mold to them.
Hmm.
And then you start anticipating their requirements before they can come up with them. That's when you get into that next level
Yeah.
where no matter who they are, you can work with them, right?
No. Yeah.
So
Very true.
that was kind of my experience at Third Marine Division, and it helped cast me, going forward, as I did some of the other jobs that I did later on down the road.
Yeah. And you're 100% right. It's all about being able to work with somebody, especially as enlisted. Our job, advise and recommend. That's kind of what you got to do. You got to get in and understand who it is that you're working for and how they operate. So you can advise them based on that.
Right.
So
The folks that I see that struggle doing advisory type work are the folks that are very rigid,
yeah.
or like, well, I do this way. I'm like, okay, but you're not the boss.
Yeah.
And if you stay enlisted, you have to understand that.
Yeah.
Your authorities are given to you by your boss, right? And if you are not somebody that they have trust and confidence in, it makes it difficult to be able to execute what you're supposed to do as an enlisted professional and take care of your Marines, right?
Very
So
true.
for me, understanding my boss, being able to anticipate those requirements, being able to represent him or her well, I saw that as a force multiplier for my Marines because the more credibility I had, the better off their life would be later on down the road, even though they might not have seen the behind the scenes of a lot of
Right.
things.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and then just being able to, if you have a good working relationship, being able to go in. Sometimes, you get in arguments or whatever with that officer, uh, but behind closed doors, you work it out and you walk out as a senior enlisted, and it's whatever the idea is and whatever he said, this is what we're doing. It's the best thing since sliced bread, and we're going to go forth and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head too. And I would tell every boss that I had, whether they were 06, 08, whoever they are, right? My
Hmm.
job, from a BAMSIS perspective, right? Like the troop leading steps, right? BAMSIS,
Yeah.
I'm here to advise you up until right? You issue
Hmm.
the order and I'm executing and I'm trusting that you've listened to me, right?
Yeah.
And you've decided. So, good officers, they listen to their enlisted Marines, right?
Yeah,
They listen to
absolutely.
their chiefs. Great officers make their own calls because they're ultimately responsible for it, right?
Oh yeah.
And I take that job, my advisory job, the most serious out of, any other position I have, right?
Hmm.
In an organization because there's special trust and confidence there. And, you need to be able to step up to the plate and adapt to your boss to be able to get through or to do or perform that job. So, uh, I in BAMSIS, and then I tell them I'm going to come back with updates.
Hmm.
As we move on past the I, it might cause you to change your mind, might cause you to stay put, but I've got your back as long
Yeah.
as the order is legal,
Yeah.
and ethical.
Not unethical or something.
I've got you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Very
And I
true.
think that's important because if your boss knows that they can trust you to execute, even though you're not doing something that you really thought was a great idea,
Hmm.
later on down the road, I think they'll be more apt to listen to you. And the other thing I would say, this is obviously outside the confines of just kind of moving through my career, but I've noticed that I've never had to tell a boss, "I told you so."
Yeah.
Because if something goes awry, usually there's eye contact and we already know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other great thing about, being able to advise until that eye is if something does go wrong, they remember what that advice was and they can quickly pivot, right? Like
Yeah.
the plan B is right there. And, usually it's just eye contact and execute and things are taken care
Hmm. Yeah. And it's important, even on our side, to, as you're having those conversations and everything, and okay, makes the decision. It was a bad decision, not going the right way. We, as that senior enlisted advisor, have to know, okay, what were we discussing, the different avenues of approach, and we may have to pivot right away to kind of, I don't want to say save face, but kind of make sure it shifts in the right direction.
of. Right.
So. All right. Well, hey, I think this is probably a good stopping point,
Okay.
and then we'll have you back on to finish out the rest of your career and get words of wisdom and some more sea stories from you. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Awesome. Hey, to everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. Stay motivated. Change your socks.